Good morning, everyone. Is it still good morning? I know we were a little behind. Yes, it is. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, awesome. Well, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to League Apps for giving us an opportunity to do this. We're just going to take a quick moment to all introduce ourselves. We're going to talk about a lot of exciting stuff here today. I'll just get us going. My name is Mike Babbage. I'm a senior recruiting analyst at Sports Recruits. For those who don't know what Sports Recruits is, we're a recruiting platform that tries to simplify the recruiting process for student athletes and their families. Think of it as LinkedIn for student athletes, being able to communicate with coaches, keep track of your interests and activity. My main role is specifically working with individual families looking for specific support in the recruiting process. And a big part of that is keeping track of what really has been a pretty chaotic last 2 years with major changes, specifically within the NCAA. So we're going to try and do a great job of breaking all that down for you here today. And I'll kick it over to Graham to introduce himself next.
Sure, thanks. My name is Graham Leviston, founder of College Properties Group. Prior to starting CPG back in 2011, I spent north of 20 years at Nike in a number of different roles. What we do is we provide opportunities for high school athletes to get recruited in different sports: lacrosse, field hockey, soccer, ice hockey, and we're the first organization, I believe, in the country to start an NIL event for youth high school players. And I think we'll get into that in a little while. Thanks.
Hi, Ed Cull here, Vice President and Director of Athletics at St. John's University here in New York City. Great to be with you. So been in this role for about a year now. And prior to this, I'm really a non-traditional AD. I was AD 6 years at Fordham University in the Bronx, but also 7 years at Vitamin Water, 3.5 at Coca-Cola. I'm sports and entertainment marketing, NFL for a couple of years as well. So excited to talk about the new and crazy landscape with all of you.
I'm Jamie Loprice. I'm the CEO of the Alliance Fast Pitch. It's a youth fast pitch organization where a lot of the travel ball, the club organizations got together, and I get to lead that initiative. Really former player, former college coach, so all things softball is really my lens.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Justin Brashear. I'm an attorney, an agent, an advisor, and athlete advocate. I'm the CEO and founder of the College Athlete Consulting Company. The goal is to educate and empower the next generation of college athletes. And when I'm not doing that, I'm working with elite NFL caliber talent through their collegiate and professional journeys as an agent. So happy to be here and look forward to talking with you.
Cool. Thank you, guys. The less I talk today, the better off, because we have some fantastic panelists here. So before we get into some questions that we have for everyone, we're just going to do a quick debrief and just a quick breakdown of really what some of those major changes are that we're going to focus on today. So if we don't mind just switching to the next slide, which will just be our backdrop here for the rest of the conversation. There's really going to be, the NCAA settlement ended up being really a big focus on a lot of time of what I spent over the last year and a half or so. And the two pieces we're going to focus on today from that settlement that did get passed in June are particularly with roster limits and this new revenue sharing model that a majority of Division I is going through. From a roster limit perspective, the good side of it is that every sport within the NCAA Division I who decided to opt into the settlement, they're not limited with how many scholarships they can provide their student athletes on each individual program. However, there is no floor with that. So whether you are a men's basketball team, a football team, volleyball team, you are not required to give a certain amount of scholarships. So it really is up to each individual school or each conference to make that determination of how much money you want to invest in your program from a scholarship perspective. The other piece of it as well is, for the first time in the history of college athletics, college programs are able to pay their college athletes directly for the first time. For this year, the way that I've been looking at it is essentially a salary cap where across your entire athletic department, $20.5 million can be distributed across all of your athletic programs. For those who are in the Power Four, all those big college programs that we think of, Michigan, Ohio State, anyone in the SEC, we've seen the trend that we've seen particularly for this year has certainly been 85 to 90% of that revenue share money going to football and men's basketball, but there certainly are opportunities outside of that in some other sports as well. And then the two other pillars we'll also talk about today: NIL oversight. NIL has been around for a few years. That certainly has been a piece of the conversation and probably what's garnered the most media attention, which in college athletics. But for the first time ever, there will be NIL oversight directly from the NCAA. NIL Go is a new clearinghouse that was put together where any NIL deal valued over $600 must be approved by that clearinghouse. Some mixed reviews that I've heard about that, but that isn't going to be a main part of our discussion today. And lastly, the rise of the transfer portal, also something that has caused a ton of media attention. The numbers go up and up in every sport each year for how many student athletes are looking to transfer, but doesn't always necessarily guarantee success. About 50% of people who enter their name in the transfer portal will end up at a Division I school that's at the same level that they were at, or at a higher level of the program that they were previously a part of. So that's just a quick breakdown of some of the things that we'll be focusing on today. And now to go to our panelists, my first question is actually going to be for Jamie. With your experience with Alliance and the student athletes and club operators that you work with, what would you say are some of the biggest struggles or pain points that the families and the club directors that you're working with are coming to you for support, and just the kind of the confusion that comes with that?
I think first off, the title of this is so real, and I think we're all dealing with it across every single youth sport. It's the reality of what it is right now, and the conversations. There's always been struggles on the recruiting, but the highlight, what's in the mainstream media right now, is NIL. And even in our own sport of softball, we had the $1 Million Player, right? If you watch the Women's College World Series, it was everywhere. But I think the real questions in that are really impacting are the roster limits. Where softball, when I went, I think sports recruits can quote me on this, but it was 11, 12 scholarships, and you split those up. And now, it's almost like the top kids are getting more money because they can now at these schools, and it's going to affect that other 80% even more. And so, though it may not be talked about as much, I think the biggest impact that our sport is having, and the questions that they're having, are around the roster limits and what that means for our recruits.
Would you say, is it fair to say on your end that you have seen a significant trickle-down effect where 5 years ago what you would consider a Division I player may be a lower level, maybe they go down Division II or non-Power 4? Do you get a sense that people should have a bigger perspective on casting a wide net and just giving yourself a larger variety of options? And if so, what are those conversations like with parents who may not love to hear that advice?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can all attest to it, of just the being honest and being real with your athletes and having those hard conversations. I'm looking at now our mid-majors are becoming essentially what junior college was for baseball. Where you go there for a couple years, you get playing time, you're doing well, you're getting the stats, and then you enter the transfer portal, and now you get a chance to go not only play it at a Power 4, but earn some money as well. Yeah. So that is the conversation. I think it's actually helping some mid-majors as well, but I think it all starts with, obviously, those very honest conversations that you have to have with your families.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm so happy that Ed, you're here today as well, because you come from, I guess, the other side of the fence, being at St. John's and kind of having that experience. I believe, was it your first year with this implementation of roster, or this is the first year that you're going through the roster limit structure, and you started at St. John's last year? Is that correct?
That's correct. So really, it went into effect July 1 as a part of the House settlement. So we're all kind of reacting here 90 days, 120 days into this.
Right. So when you're building out a strategy at St. John's to determine, what program is going to receive a boost in support, where there might be some situations where maybe there isn't going to be as many resources available for different sports, how do you have those conversations? How do you make that decision of what needs to be shifted? Because it is a pretty significant change that I don't think has ever been seen at this level.
Yeah, it's a major topic every single day in terms of how we are handling these changes, how we're handling the new world of college athletics, or really professional sports, which is what we are doing. The term rev share is really a horrible term because we don't have college football here at St. John's. So we have high-end basketball in the Big East, which is, I guess, kind of considered your outside of your 5 or 6 in terms of conferences. So we're not generating the same amount of money as the SEC or the Big Ten. And how do we compete with them at that level if we're not doing that? So we generate revenue for sure for college basketball, but not enough to cover the expenses of an entire athletics department. So Jamie's concerns there in terms of what happens to scholarships in the future is great. So you talk about roster limits. That's awesome for the Power 4, who can go above and beyond, has the financial means to do that. Mid-majors, which we still kind of fall into that category, there's fear of some Olympic sports scholarships being cut in order to pay for rev share. So something we're monitoring. Right now we're being aggressive with rev share just for men's and women's basketball. We fall below the cap of $20.5 million, but we're not saying no to lacrosse or softball to do something, but it has to really be a creative external support mechanism or a company or a donor that's willing to do this. So we're definitely flying the plane while building it, which is not comforting, but it's a little bit of an experiment to see what's the return on investment, what's sustainable, and how do we find alternate revenue streams to continue to cover it, because it's not that the school is going to empty an endowment to help us do this.
You're in an interesting situation with St. John's where you have a preseason top 5 ranked men's basketball program, and where I think if you look around the rest of the top 25, a majority of those programs do have football. So in your experience, in your perspective, do you look at that as an advantage or a disadvantage? I guess from a revenue share perspective, that would lead me to believe that it would be an advantage since you don't have football to divvy up those finances too. But does the revenue that you're building change because of that also?
I think right now it's potentially an advantage for us in that everybody hasn't figured out their model yet. Yeah. And we are blessed that we have some financial supporters that want to see the institution succeed and do well, and then are investing heavily in college basketball and Coach Pitino. We'll see what the return on that investment is, Michael, right, in terms of how this year goes. Top 5 is amazing. So it's almost a big bet. It's almost a big investment. And I will add, it's not just an athletics movement. For us, it's a global one. So we need more applications. We need more enrollment numbers. We need more donations. We need better facilities in terms of campus. We need more of a marketing profile in terms of expanding our brand. So it's a global institutional campaign and discretion. It's not just an athletics we hope to win situation.
Gotcha. I'm interested in your perspective, Graham, from the events perspective, because that is obviously a major piece of where a lot of student athletes try and build exposure for themselves, try and get their name out there, and ultimately get that visibility with college programs. And I think, as we've said so far, it's more difficult to break through with some of these higher end college programs from a Division I, Power 4 perspective. What would you say are the most important steps that student athletes can take in preparation for competing in front of those highest priority programs? And how can you make the decision on which events are going to be most worth it for you based on the sports that you typically work with?
Yeah, it's a good question, Mike. It's interesting. I've been in this space, and I'll speak to lacrosse specifically. I've been in it a long time, and we run events that are basically their prospect camps, and really our model is working with about 95% of the folks we work with are head coaches. So that's kind of the value proposition, is getting kids in front of the ultimate decision maker, which is really important from a recruiting perspective. But club is also a really important aspect of the recruiting phase, because they're playing with these clubs all summer long. They're playing way too much during the summer. That's a topic for another time. But they're playing club. They're doing a bunch of other events. But I think it's important to work with the club coach. The club coach has great relationships with the college coaches, so it vets the player character, kind of intangibles as I refer to them. So it's playing club and then picking and choosing kind of what you want to do as a family. Once you've kind of honed in on what's the academic piece, because with lacrosse, that's first and foremost is where do you fit academically, and then kind of go from there, but working in all different facets.
Yeah, makes sense. I think it's a good kind of natural progression to get into the NIL side of it, because of course revenue share is a piece, but I think there's a lot to learn because it is so new, so we really don't know what those major impacts are going to be, particularly in those sports outside of basketball and football. And I know with your experience, Justin, in terms of working with these student athletes who are potentially having NIL deals on the table, and that may lead on to bigger and better things down the road. I think there's a lot of club directors and families who aren't quite sure, how do I know if I'm even going to be marketable enough for someone who even can have conversations like that? So in your experience, what are some of those signs that people can look at where it's like, hey, this is a true reality for me, that it's not just a scholarship, but it could lead to income on top of that?
Sure, that's a great question. I think that in today's day and age, the people that are going to speak the loudest are the ones that are generally going to bring the attention. Now, speaking can come obviously from your social media posting, your visibility outside the game, but it can also happen in the inside the lines, in the classroom, in the community, and doing those kinds of things that add value to yourself as an individual, add value to your program, whether it's a club team or whether it's your university or institution. Those kinds of things, if you're that type of person, you're able to do that. At that point, you're going to start getting more and more opportunities. And I often tell the young people that I work with, if you want multiple deals, if you want to build an NIL portfolio, it starts with the first deal. So the first deal may be an in-kind situation where you're going into a local bakery and you're doing something, you're posting on social media. You have to show that you're capable of performing the deliverables and following up. I heard the conversation earlier was about walking the walk. You have to be able to do that if you want to continue to get the deals. So that's generally where I start with it. And look, in some circumstances, the elite performers, people are going to come to them. Mm. And so when you start to see either one of those two situations present themselves, and you couple that with the desire to actually do it, at that point it can become a real opportunity for the athletes.
Kind of a this actually just popped in my head. Have you ever been in a situation where there's been an athlete who has shown interest in earning NIL and maybe the potential wasn't quite there with where they're at, and how do you handle a discussion like that?
I mean, my job is to, again, like Jamie said, tell the truth.
Yeah.
So if there's not the look, I work with elite NFL caliber athletes, but most of the time they're offensive linemen. They're not the most marketable people in the world. I love them to death.
They should be.
Yeah, I love them. They do all the dirty work. But the reality is, that's not necessarily what the brands want. And so in that context, we turn the value conversation somewhere else, and we start looking at roster values. We start looking at the different things they can do for themselves, and it leads to, hey, we're gonna keep the main thing while we're an athlete first. We're not a brand necessarily. You're part of the business. You're part of a bigger ecosystem, but you have to perform in order for people to want you to be involved in their organization. So that's generally where I turn it back to. If they want the Nike deal, but they're pulling trap plays, it's not the same as the guy scoring touchdowns.
One more follow-up for you, because I think there is also the element we're talking about, the side of the athlete where they're trying to make this work, but there's also, I think there's always been a worry that there are people out there where these athletes are exposed to potentially some bad actors in this space.
There's no question about that.
So kind of talking about the warning signs of that, like what are some things that club directors, people who might be in this room who are working with athletes who are getting really excited about opportunities being presented to them, and what are those couple of things that come to mind where you think, hey, this might not be the best situation for you?
That's a great question. I would say first and foremost to consider the source. So whoever's coming to you with the opportunity or the whatever it is, consider the source, consider what they're looking to gain from it, and how they're looking to interact or collaborate with if they're willing to collaborate with your group is one thing. I think the other thing is the structure of compensation sometimes leads to, for me at least, some red flags. If you see people that are, I see people that are negotiating, NIL deals in the transfer portal, but they're calling them marketing contracts and charging triple what they should charge. That's taking advantage of the athlete. So for me, it's about educating the athletes, it's about educating the families about what a good relationship with representation should look like. I can speak to it as a player who had representation, and I'm doing it now, so that's part of the process. But again, I think the biggest thing is consider the source, consider the person or the opportunity that's presented, and see if it makes sense from your own value before you pursue it.
Yeah. On your end, Jamie, I guess kind of a similar question. Have you been in a situation, or have any of your club directors been in a situation where they've had to have that hard conversation? Whether it be, hey, I just don't think the earning potential is there for you right now, but here are the steps to do that. Or on the other side, hey, this just sounds a little too good to be true. Is that something you've experienced so far?
I think all the time. And I will say with the Alliance, we do have a lot of the better teams. In softball, those are the kids that are getting some of the bigger deals. But we also are having club directors. I don't know if you guys are going through this, but they're getting on the calls now with the colleges talking about things that are way over their head, right, of legal contracts. And they're involved in now these NIL deals too, that it's like, I don't actually know what that is, I need to actually consult with the legal team over here and talk about those things. But absolutely. And then, just being realistic, I think always is important of what is your value. And ours is very position specific too. Like an offensive lineman, if you're that right fielder, you're probably not going to get those larger deals like a pitcher would.
Right. Makes sense. For you, Ed, I think kind of sticking on this NIL topic, something that I feel like I've read more articles that I can count has been this discussion around collectives. And it seems like the NCAA at this time is trying to limit the use of collectives for a lot of these major programs. How does a program like St. John's find the balance of providing athletes with financial opportunities, but also managing like maybe external interest that they're receiving outside of what might be involved with the university?
Yeah, great question, Mike, and obviously an ongoing topic for us in terms of assessing this. I believe the NCAA, as a part of the House settlement on July 1st, was hoping collectives would go away, just be done. Right, bring it all in-house, bring it underneath the university, college umbrella in terms of comfort level, oversight, make it institutional discretion. The problem is you highlighted a $20.5 million cap for those in the Power Four. If you have high-end basketball and football, they're going way over that in terms of $20.5 million. So they need the collectives. So the collectives cannot go away for them. And those state legislations, you've heard some of them loud and proud, it will not go away. So I know there's some feeling of, hey, will Congress get involved or the Trump administration here in terms of legislation? I think Charlie Baker would like that, but I wouldn't hold our breath on that. So I think I think collectives are not going away. From a St. John's perspective, we don't have college football, so we're below that cap, and we should be comfortable there. We still have some collective activity. I think for companies and corporations or businesses who are spending a marketing budget, it's a little bit easier for them to do that or get direct access to a kid or to work with Justin and their representation directly. So that's still living there. It's fine. But for donors and boosters, now that you can go through the institution, they get a tax write-off, so it's cleaner to come through us. But I think collectives are here to stay. I don't see that ever changing. NIL Go, I know you referenced that, will need to be worked out a little bit. And Deloitte and Touche, that's working that for NCAA. We'll see how that evolves. But I think collectives are forever going to be part of our madness.
On your end, Graham, I think because when you hear NIL, at least for me, I think the experience is you see the seven-figure deal for those really recognizable people, Archie Manning, Livy Dunn, all these huge men's basketball players, Cooper Flagg. And I think that ends up giving a little bit of a incorrect notion of what the earning potential is for a lot of student athletes. I know you said lacrosse is a sport that you're heavily involved in. What is the actual earning reality for college athletes outside of football and basketball that you specifically work with?
I mean, I've spoken to a lot of folks about this, both family members and players alike, and it's not the non-rev sports is not a lot of opportunity out there. Mm-hmm. I think the one thing that we're doing to get kids, in high school to learn about NIL is we developed this NIL event in the lacrosse space. So we brought in, it's a girls event and a boys event. There's about 1,600 kids. We brought in the best players as captains, and we held a live draft where they drafted their teams. And then ultimately the most marketable team, as it needs to be referred to, not the winning team, because then it becomes pay for play, earned $60,000 in each event. So we gave away $120,000 in NIL to high school kids. And we're bringing that down to 8th to 9th graders and 10th graders this year, $15,000 for the most marketable team. But the most important thing to recognize with this NIL was that we made sure they engage with a charity of their choice. So in order to receive the money, they had to select a charity, do X amount of work, X number of hours worth of work with that respective charity, post that information on social, tag us in the whole thing, and then they had to sign a one-off NIL deal, which was created by an attorney that we've retained, Mitt Winter, very well-respected attorney in NIL space. We retained him to create all the paperwork and legalese around this stuff. And, it forced hundreds of kids to engage with charities, which is really important for us. And we're going to continue to grow on this. And some of these kids got $3,700 on a one-time deal. And that's probably, for a lot of these kids, even going through college, the biggest and single NIL deal they'll ever have. And so, but we're teaching them about the process. We're talking to families. We have Zooms, all of that stuff. So I feel it gives a lot of these kids some understanding of NIL and what they have to do and what to expect.
I'm thinking of my bank account in college, and it wasn't that. So that sounds pretty cool, even though it might not be.
Can I add a little bit to that, just coming from softball being a non-revenue sport? So I asked, our 2027s are going through the process right now, and I asked our coaches, are they getting offers? What's the going rate, essentially? And obviously this is for a very small few, but there are some of our 27s that are being offered $30,000 a year. Awesome. On top of getting a full ride scholarship in a sport like softball. And so I was like, whoa, and now players that are already there could get upwards. But the problem is that's a very, very small few. That's not the reality of everybody. But it is crazy to think that now a 16, 17-year-old softball player could end school with $120,000 or more.
And some, like the Ivies, don't have collectives. They aren't paying anybody. And so you've got the Ivies that are competing with North Carolina's the world, at least in lacrosse and soccer and other areas, and that some kids are getting those deals and they can't offer anything, and it's need-based financial aid. Right. So it's a very different dynamic. But the Ivies are still getting really great players in those respective sports, and I think they're deciding, what do I want to do with my life, once sports is over.
In addition to opting out of the settlement as well.
Correct. Right. Yes.
One thing you were saying, Justin, right before we got on, was that you actually think the ceiling of NIL advancement is actually higher for women's athletes compared to men's in a lot of ways. So I just kind of want you to expand on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, the lawyer hat in me says there's no way that we don't get some Title IX lawsuits from this. Yeah. And I think that when that happens, I think there's going to be some direction that's going to redirect some of the cap money, mandate some of the cap money moving into women's sports. Obviously, particularly women's basketball with its meteoric rise over the last couple of years has been fantastic to watch. I think some programs that get ahead of the curve and maybe start looking into being creative with how they, Ed kind of talked about being creative in your department. Well, there's flag football coming in the Olympics. The NFL is making a big push on flag football, and if you want to start balancing the scales, adding in a women's flag football team and sort of redirecting some of your resources there is probably a good move for some programs. But I definitely think that besides those things, women are inherently better storytellers, and storytelling sells in the marketplace. They follow through on their deliverables better than male athletes do. So, the reality is from a brand's perspective, a brand has a more proven, commodity that they're engaging with. So I definitely think that, with the rise of women's sports through the lens of soccer or women's hockey or the WNBA, it sort of can create a trickle down for more female athletes, which I think is fantastic. Yeah. I have a 9-year-old daughter, so I'm vested in this as well.
Softball.
She's a dancer right now, but
hey,
we'll see.
I think there's a natural connection between NIL and the transfer portal, which, of course, again, is something that we've heard so many stories, so many articles written about. So, would you say, are we in a world right now where NIL has become a retention tool for these transfer student athletes? Maybe again, are we talking about this very small percentage where that's the case? Are we not quite there yet? So in your perspective, is that something that are the top players getting attracted specifically through the transfer portal, and is that taking away from the high school athletes, again, specifically in football, but maybe even outside of those sports too?
Yeah, so it's interesting to see the dynamic of what the athletic departments have decided and the individual programs have decided to do with the allocation of their resources. And so I generally ask the question about roster retention, or the young men that I work with in the space, we try to understand what their goals are, and if it's something that they can accomplish where they are, then we become proactive with their current program, and we go to the program and we talk retention before we talk about the alternative options. Not everybody does that. I'm sure the ADs and the coaches would probably like more of that. The transfer portal is a nasty place. It's not a place that you want to go and dip your toe in and try to figure it out. You better have a plan when you get in there. It moves very quickly. And it's definitely not a place to gamble. I'll give you a quick stat I read on the way up here. There were 80 in the 24-25 academic calendar, Division I football alone, okay? Over 8,000 players into the transfer portal. Now, out of context, that represents 30%, roughly 30% of the entire available roster spots under the House settlement. So if you take any labor market, and I know that we're not going to get in the pay-for-play or employment situation here, but you take a labor market and you say every year that 30% of it's going to be upset and recycled, that is a very volatile place to be. And so, again, it comes to athlete education. It comes to understanding the goals and the realities of where you are, and then being proactive with using the retention tools that schools have available to them. They're already in the building. They're already around the coaches. They're already familiar with the campus. Those things are very valuable to the student athletes in their overall development and maturation as a person, first and foremost. So I think that schools that do a good job retaining talent are the ones that are going to separate themselves from the pack, because you can't keep up with the spend every year to try to replace your current team. Right. You certainly can't build a culture that way.
Right. On your end, Jamie, because you mentioned that some of that upper echelon of the softball world, $30,000 NIL deals, incredible opportunity. Would you say is there a mix of that, whether that be high school athletes and transfers? Do you think it skews one way or the other? Just with that sport specifically, what have you seen in terms of earning potential?
Yeah, I think it's still the very, very top few that are getting. Nyjah Kennedy's a pitcher at Texas Tech. She did the $1 million deal, right? But that is one player. I think the most majority are probably a $5,000, a $10,000, which I would have taken at 18 years old. But it's still definitely very small. I think what's interesting is recruiting doesn't stop now at 18, right? And so everybody in here as club directors, you're still on the phone with these college coaches, because who's the first person they're going to call? Right. Is the club director. And they are hanging that NIL money. If you're a pitcher right now in softball and you're decent and you're pitching at a mid-major, their SEC schools are going after you because they have to play 3-game series, and that's where the money is going. And so now our travel ball coaches and directors, they're becoming NIL agents essentially.
That's dangerous.
Absolutely. They don't have that expertise, right, that we all pay lawyers for. And so I think there's a real problem and a real need that we need more guidance in just to help them through, because they've become agents now
Right.
once their kids get into college.
Right. I'm interested in your perspective on this as well, Ed, because I remember reading some articles about Coach Pitino in particular, where he said, "Look, I'm going to focus on transfers." Maybe that doesn't mean that I believe there may have been a couple of high school recruits that have been brought on for this year, but it does seem like the majority is going to be through that portal because of that win now mentality, having athletes who have that experience playing at that level. What do you see outside of men's basketball? Has that been also a big priority for maybe some of the other sports on campus too?
Yeah, I think Coach Pitino has been very vocal about the kind of the new world here, college athletics, and his quote is a pretty good one of, his fear in this whole process is the most amount of money these student athletes will ever make is right now playing for me, and are we doing them a disservice for their future of their life, right? So we've talked a lot about support and pro bono lawyers and pro bono IRS agents and folks, but it gets dicey as Jamie and Justin alluded to in terms of family and entourage and people that they are trusting in this process. So not to digress on that, but I think Coach's feelings are, if we're spending millions of dollars on a roster, which is what we're doing, do I want to invest in a high school 18-year-old who needs some emotional time, needs a little bit of development time, needs a little bit of hand-holding? So I'm going to spend a lot of money on that student athlete. They probably won't play a lot to contribute in year one, which is typical, right? We all went through that as student athletes. But then I might lose them. I got to give them a raise next year. I got to keep them from going to the portal. Does it make sense for a win now mentality? Which is crazy to say. Believe me, I own that. It's crazy to say. So that's where we are. Where he's living in the portal. I think we had 10 new players this year, 4 returnees from a Big East championship team from a top 10 team in the country. I will say this about the portal, in defense of the portal, and I'm very critical of it, as you can tell. Transferring from higher education, that's an epidemic everywhere. So general population are transferring like crazy in terms of retention rates are down, graduation rates are down. We all know participation in college, especially males, is down. So that whole mentality of instant gratification, besides pay for play or NIL, and there's a big separation between those two terms, is I'm not happy here. I'm going to the next school, or my friends are here. Or I'm out of here. I'm just done with this, right? They hit eject and they're gone. Yeah. So that is part of the problem here, not just an athletics problem. This is a higher education problem. I just want to be very clear on that. The numbers prove that. Numbers are still higher on transfers on the general population than they are in athletics. So this is not just an athletics we're chasing. And then the other part, and Justin nailed it, I don't know why it's not a bigger story for the kids or student athletes that don't find a home. Why is that not a story? I lost my scholarship, now I don't graduate. I don't know that's not a story for some reason. I guess because the money is such a sexy, glamorous topic. But there's so many kids that are foregoing their scholarship and now don't have a place to play, or it's over for them. And I would say then there's a large percentage of students who are entering the portal already knowing where they're going. Because, and Justin knows this, whether it be tampering, that's a bad term anymore because we don't have tampering in NCAA, but how do we, that is happening prior to them going in. They already know what the offers are at the high level.
Right.
And then my last comment is we avoided every aspect of trying not to make them employees and fighting the antitrust laws. At least for football and basketball, we should have made them employees. Because we can collectively bargain. They could have unionized. We could have had some salary caps and guardrails. Now it's over. We can't go back now. Justin's going to say, you're not going to limit my client's ability to earn income right now. We can't go backwards and constrain that. So I don't know. This is going to be interesting where it goes. That's why I think there's a lot of change ahead of us. But we fought so hard because we didn't want to pay them benefits. We didn't want to call them employees. We should have. We could have actually then organized this a lot better because now the Wild Wild West is here, and I don't know how it ever comes back.
One more thing to follow up on that. The interesting part you said, we talked about the use of collectives and sort of how they've changed. What I've seen, at least anecdotally, is collectives are the ones that are being creative with the ways that they add value to the clients in an employment type situation. So there's a school that can't pay at the highest levels of football rev share, but what they can do is put a pension program together that those players can tap into for the next, from 5 years after they leave until they're 50. That's a large chunk of your life to know you have consistent income. It's really nice. And so if you can get to the athletes and teach them those things and teach them that value, there is a way to make it work.
Well said. I mean, NIL, the starting of it should have been softball student athlete who plays guitar, they were never allowed to even play in a wedding and receive money, right? That's crazy. Or they couldn't give a lesson. Or I had a tattoo artist that couldn't give out tattoos and pay. We understood that. That's ridiculous. That should have been changed, that rule. But to Justin's point, and I feel like we should have done this as NCAA, or NCAA could have led this. Fine, we're paying Archie Manning $8 million. Let's give it to him over 30 years as a pension, as a $250,000 payout every year. Archie, good news. 30 years, your life's set. We're going to give you this check. Instead of just giving it a lump sum right now. We should have been more creative for the future of that student athlete, because I wasn't ready at 18 to take on that kind of money. Who is? That was we should have thought a little bit more that way.
Yeah. I think Archie in particular probably is in a better spot than most with that also. A little support there.
He'll be fine.
So I think, obviously, we're talking about these big pieces, these major changes, kind of all the chaos that comes with it. But I think in preparation for this, I think one of the main themes that I was looking to focus on was, look, this is the reality for some people, but the large majority, it is not. College athletics I think the reality is college athletics, because of this, has gotten more competitive because there are smaller rosters at the top. You're going to have that trickle-down effect, and it is going to be more difficult. So really focusing on finding that fit socially, geographically, financially should be a piece, but if you're in a situation where that doesn't have to be the number one priority, that's really going to give you the ultimate college experience that we hope for any student athlete who's on Sports Recruits. So I guess I'll kind of let each of you go down the line, and maybe Graham, starting with you, just like maybe any general advice that you have for someone in this situation, in this reality, who are kind of coming to you saying, hey, I don't know what way is up and down. What is the best advice you can give someone going through this new world of college athletics for the first time?
I mean, we work with, non-rev sports, right? For me, it's education.
Yeah.
It's not, the discussion is not even around NIL. It's make sure if you want to maximize your educational opportunities, get the best education, enjoy your 4 years, because the social, the academic piece, all that is really important for kids in college. And it's not even a big issue for me. I just focus on your experience in college, and then grow from there. It's if I was in football or basketball, it'd be a different conversation. But yeah.
Real quickly here, besides an AD or working in sports business, I'm a father. I have a 13 and 14-year-old. I go to youth games. I actually hate the experience because parents are really the problem in this equation. It's not the student athletes, and that's even at my level. What's Johnny's chances? Johnny's chances at what? Like, why are we having that? Right. They're 12. Yeah. You can't walk straight and chew gum. Like, let him play today. Have fun, please. You got the rest of your life to worry about that. But I agree with Graham. What is the purpose of youth sport? What's the purpose of college education? What do I want for my kid is what you all need to reinforce to your parents. Yes, chase your dreams. Dreams are beautiful. We all should chase them. But keep perspective, and that the parents, they need training, they need development. Parents need to be sat down and educated, and they'll help the kids better.
Yeah, I'll just say I was encouraged when I was talking to our club directors. That connection, they said, is still really important, and even players have said no to money because of the connection that they had with that school, that program. So I was encouraged with that. But, I look around, and what we're doing at the Alliance is we're going to get help because, unfortunately, for parents, they already have a ton of questions, right? And I came from a family that wasn't business oriented. They don't understand contracts and legal terms. And so I think, what can we do collectively as sports to give the right education, find the right resources, because it is a whole new game out there, and we just have to educate them so much more on legal aspects, contracts, and different things, just to prepare them. So I'm looking at myself internally as an organization, and what can we do better to better serve our families.
I mean, I'll just drive that point home, how important education is, not only from the standpoint of, going somewhere and earning your academic degree and setting yourself up for success beyond the game, in business and life, whatever, but to Jamie's point, the families that are around these young people, that they're the ones that have brought them to the practices. They're the ones that have picked them up, and they've, when they make an error on the field, they're the ones giving the hugs. They've been there longer than we have. And so they want to help, but they don't know how to help. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is get that education to the families, to the people that do come from blue-collar upbringings that have this incredible opportunity to play in collegiate athletics in front of them. And yes, some of it may be NIL money, some of it may be whatever, but it's the ultimate college experience, the ultimate American experience, and learning how to become an adult is what is in front of these young people these days. So educating the families and providing resources that they don't have right now is, I think, the most important part.
Awesome. I see our clock went down here, but maybe we have time if anyone does have any questions in the audience that they want to ask any of the panelists here. Yeah.
Question for Ed, as a Big East AD. Obviously, men's basketball is men's basketball.
Yeah, so great question, and I think it's important for Olympic sports, right? So it's honestly the strategy right now, and it's TBD in terms of the success rate of what's sustainable right now in terms of this model. But I tell all my coaches this, and I'm very transparent about what we spend, what we're doing, because you got to have the trust of your coaches. They know the limitations. They know what their sport does or does not do in terms of priority. And each institution has their own vision, right, of which sport means a lot to them, a history of success, or what it may mean to a donor base or their brand profile, right? We need to win at basketball to make more revenue. Yes, to invest it back into basketball, but to also invest in all of our sports. We got to upgrade facilities. We need to upgrade care. We need more psychologists on staff to help the mental health of our kids. We need more folks to help support. So I really present it that way, that basketball revenue trickles down to the benefit of all of our programs. And if that doesn't work, and it may not, then we have to audible. We have to figure out what's next. We have to adjust. I think you'll see a lot of mid-major schools get out of this business and drop down to Division II and just have scholarships and not be pay to play. But I also think you're going to see what the Big Ten just did now, $2.4 billion later. They're going to jump up and do their own thing. They're going to separate from the NCAA. It could be an NCAA in a couple of years. So I think that's the inevitability of this. But being honest, I truly feel like that if basketball can generate more funds, they help our programs. And when that stops happening, then we have to adjust.
I think really the main theme is more change is coming. We may or may not know what that change is, but what shouldn't change is trying to give student athletes an opportunity to get a better education through athletics, regardless of what division or conference that might be. I saw one more arm up out there.
This is coming from a non-revenue sport. With regards to the roster limits and some of the revenue sharing, what we were kind of advising families and parents is to go to the head coach or the coaching staff to understand if they opted in or not. Understanding that some did and some didn't. Is that information public as opposed to having to go to the head coach? Is that on an athletic website? Is there a central database to understand from a more macro perspective who's opted in, who's opted out?
Yeah, there is. So I can definitely help you out with that after this. But 82% of Division I programs opted into the settlement. So I believe that was 310 schools, if I remember correctly. A majority of the schools that opted out were Ivy League, Patriot League, and then a few others kind of in that mid-major sector. Anyone that's in the Power Four, so your SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, they all said yes to it as a conference. So a little bit outside of that.
And I would just add to Michael's point, as a conference,
Yeah.
so I could save you time instead of going school by school, go
Yeah.
conference by conference.
Yeah. That's one, yeah.
For athletes, I know you mentioned softball and women's sports being more marketable compared to boys sports. And as an athlete creator, I kind of saw that happen as well. How important do you think it is for non-revenue athletes like myself, a lacrosse player or a softball player, to be able to market themselves in order to achieve similar or successful NIL deals compared to revenue sports?
I could take it just from a softball. We talk about this too with our youth athletes about the importance because for our sport, we are on TV a lot and, more so than even some male sports too. So that is your opportunity in those 4 years. And so we do a lot of press conferences. Probably I'm annoying and I like to stick microphones in front of kids, but it's preparation, I think, for these kids. So I'm always thinking, what are we preparing them for in college? And hey, you give them a mic and a press conference and all of a sudden they've got content, or we have athletes host webinars for us. And same thing, we'll cut up that content, we'll put it onto our Alliance sites as well. And it helps them build their brands. I've seen they're already really good at it, but we're just helping give them another platform and eyeballs.
I would just quickly add, like lacrosse or softball, and softball, Jamie's example is great in terms of what ESPN's coverage is and that May and June window. Because you're not currently a revenue sport doesn't mean you can't be a revenue sport. So how do we leverage the platform? Lacrosse being a great example, softball as well, where those TV negotiations, hopefully going forward, are separated. So lacrosse gets their piece, softball gets their piece, and it's not lumped in together with March Madness and the overall package. It needs to be its separate entity to increase softball's value, lacrosse's value.
I'd love to keep this going. I was just getting the wrap it up sign here on my end, but thank you guys so much for your time. This was really awesome. Just from my perspective, hopefully everyone feels a little bit more informed about just kind of what this crazy world of college athletics has become. Thank you all so much for dedicating the time. I think this is really valuable and really appreciate League Apps as well. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.